Hey, how's it going, everyone? I am Nate Schomer, and you are watching my show on dog training. I'm doing a live Q&A today with a good friend and fellow dog trainer, Sergio Esquivel, who recently received his brevet, and he's working towards his Ring 1 in the sport of French Ring, which is a protection dog sport, and a very competitive one at that. He recently went to a decoy seminar, and he's constantly learning and growing to become a better dog trainer. And he's here today with me on this live Q&A to answer your questions. We're going to start by answering my channel member questions, and then we're going to go to the live feed. So Sergio Esquivel, thank you for joining us and welcome to the show.
Hey, everyone. Nate, thanks for having me. I'm super excited. As always, I love our conversations, and I'm looking forward to answering these questions and take a crack at it.
As am I. And so, as I said, we're going to start with the channel member questions, and I'm going to read what they've asked, and then you and I will talk about it and we'll answer the questions together. So the first one is, I have a dog which is conditioned to markers. Let's say her name is X. I'm soon getting a puppy, let's say Y, that I'll be training. How do I go about using my markers with both of them? I'm not fond of the idea to teach Y dog completely different markers, to be fair, but I'm scared that if I use my usual markers with her when the other dog is in the area, I will uncondition the marker for the first dog or make them less loaded. Should I try to not train them at all in the same area, which would be difficult, or maybe in the situation when they are together, I should say the name prior to the marker? Or maybe you have figured out a smarter way to go about this. I'd be very grateful for your advice. So let's go to Sergio on this one first. What do you think? Let me hear your thoughts, and then I'll add whatever I can to it.
For sure. Thanks. So I'm gonna talk about how I do it. Okay. In my experience, this is what worked for me. What I did was I just put my other dog away. All right. Especially in the beginning stages when I'm loading the marker and I'm doing that. I put my other dog away. I worked through the training session. Now, eventually, I did get to a point where I could train both dogs together, and honestly, I would pay them together. That's how I did it. Now, as far as the concern with, am I gonna, is there gonna be less value in the marker when they're hearing it? I personally don't think so. If I've loaded my marker correctly and I'm working towards that, I put my dog in the kennel and I'm working in the living room or wherever I'm working. It's not there. It's about also engagement, right? So it's not just they're going to hear this and then they're going to go into, oh, where's my treat? It's the engagement that's happening with that, right? And what I can also do is I could do other things as far as I could feed during that time. So if I put my dog in the kennel, I could feed during that time, have my other dog out, and I'm working. So at that point, the dog's focus is going to be on the food because once again, competing motivators, that's going to win. So
Yeah, and I agree because I think that sorry I cut you off there. That dogs are very situational, and so I did the same thing where my dogs are all on the same markers. And in the beginning, there was a little confusion if I was using it with the group. But with my dogs, what ended up happening, if I was working with Maverick and Maverick did something, let's say, and I marked a behavior he did, my other dogs would look at me, but they would realize I was working with Maverick and they'd go, oh, okay, that's not for me. And can it diminish the value a little bit? It's possible, but I think if the dog is aware of who you're communicating with, they're going to understand who it's for. And just like you said, training the dog separately. And really, most of the time when I have all my dogs out, I really don't use markers that much. I mean, most of the time, if I have all three of my dogs out, or even two of them, and I'm hanging out with them, I'm using a lot of informal communication, which I know you do that as well, Sergio. So just talk like, hey, come on, guys, let's go. Boop, 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 let's go, puppies, or what are you doing? And I talk to them quite a bit. And that's a little bit different than a more formal kind of structured training session. Or if I am out with the dogs and I have them as a group in, let's say, a public environment, often I am telling them to do the same thing. So I might have them both or all three in a heel command, and I'm telling them all to sit at the same time. I'm telling them all to down at the same time. So then using a marker could be effective for all of them. The only thing that you might run into is if they lay down at different speeds. So then I would probably mark once the last one laid down, and then I would reward all three, very similar to how you did or what you were talking about. Now, have you tried using different markers with multiple dogs at the same time, like maybe with other client dogs or things like that?
I haven't. So I just want to touch a little bit about what you were talking about when I do have all of my dogs together and I'm trying to do that. So we need to remember the purpose of the marker, right? So the marker is the bridge, right? So essentially it gives me time to get that reward to them, right? So I think about the primary reinforcers, food, toy, and affection. Okay, so if I have all my dogs and I'm like, hey, sit down, and he sits down, right? Because sit down is an informal command for me. Lay down, informal command. They do it. I'll just pet them. I'll provide the reward right there and then. So there's no need for a marker. When I have my
Mhm.
structured training sessions, at that point, then I'm using my yes, my free, things like that. And I'm really driving that in. And it also goes back to the concept of the difference between like a vending machine and a slot machine, right? So a vending machine, they're getting paid for everything that they do. They offer me a sit,
Mhm.
they get a reward. They offer me the down, they get a reward. Well, if I say sit and I don't reward, I start turning into that slot machine, right? So it actually could help you with your training and the overall enthusiasm and excitement of the dog when working with you in the training sessions. Now, there are different things that could kind of impact that, right? So if you have a training vest and they don't see the training vest, they're going to get smart to that. They get wise, right? And
Mhm.
maybe that pattern recognition. But if you don't have a training vest, which a lot of people don't, you know, and a lot of people I see them, they kind of just grab the treats or put them in their pocket or whatever the case may be, at least in my experience with the families I work with, they're not going to catch on right away. So when I give them that sit command or I give them that down and I'm doing these different things, at that point, I'm actually helping the training progress, in my opinion, because I move from being predictable, right? To the excitement and increasing that dopamine release, right? Because a lot of people think that dopamine release comes from when I give the dog the food or I give the dog the ball. In reality, it happens through the anticipation of the
Mhm.
ball or the food or whatever reward I'm using.
And that's why we have to build hope. So the dog has to believe that there's a possibility of them getting the reward. And I do like how you pointed out using praise. Praise is a great way to communicate with our dogs when they're doing something well. And it's very easy to direct it to a dog if you do have multiple dogs out. So I think that's a really good point to bring up and to mention. And I do that a lot as well. If I tell a dog to do, and I often, maybe I won't reward, but letting the dog know through verbal praise is a good way to communicate, to let the dog know, hey, that's great. That's what I wanted. Nice job. Keep it up. Very good. And changing the way in which we talk to them using those different tones, the dogs are going to pick up on that. And there's a lot of research that's been done. I definitely recommend those that are listening to look it up, where dogs can tell based on the tone of our voice how happy we are, and they feed off our emotions. So that's another great way to communicate. So you can reduce the amount of times or how much you're using the marker when you have multiple dogs out. And just like Sergio said earlier, when you are first working with a dog, it's always best to work with dogs on an individual basis, because remember, once we add another dog to the equation, we are increasing the difficulty of the environment. Sergio and you and I talk about this all the time, about how the environment makes it more challenging for people. And it's often something that we don't think about when we're really new and we're just getting started into dog training. And that's why we like to call it the environmental difficulty assessment. And one environment could be the same exact environment, but once we add another distraction, something that's going to compete with our dog's attention and focus, that's going to make that environment more difficult. Something I tell my clients all the time, it's like, if you want to go work at a new environment and you want to take your dog to, let's say, Home Depot, if you go to Home Depot on a Wednesday evening at 8 p.m., right before they close, there's not going to be that much traffic. But you go on a Saturday morning at 8 a.m., same environment, totally different experience for the dog because of the amount of distractions that are going to be present. So I think this was all good points and all good things you brought up. Anything else you want to add to that one, or should we move on to the next question?
I think that we're good. I mean, I kind of can segue a little bit on what you said about the environments. I guess quick a quick thing. I guess I do want to add something.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, for sure.
so so check it out, right? We talk about the different you know environments and the challenges that come with it. So this is what happens, okay, with families. Okay, the reality is you're training the pet dog, you're there, and you got the baby running across the living room. You got this going on. You got that going on. Oh, and I think I'm frozen, but that's okay.
We
Um,
can hear you.
oh, perfect. That's all we need to do. So what ends up happening is you have all these competing motivators. So working that training session in the living room with nothing out there is much different than working that training session with people coming through and passing by and things like that, right? You have competing motivators, especially if you're young into the training session, right? So if I get Fozzie out here and I work him, Fozzie is my Belgian Turf. He is, how old is he? 18 months, something like that. Either way, he's not an adult yet. You know, I get him out here and I'm working him, and I got all the kids out here, then it's going to be wild. Whereas
Mhm.
if I have Teddy out here and I'm working him, he has that discipline, he has that level of obedience where I can, right? So there is a difference. So it's know your dog, know the environment, and one of the biggest things that I would say is set them up for success, right? We want wins, right? We don't want them competing with all those different motivators and then people applying positive punishment, right? Because we're just setting up the dog for failure.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, and there's times where setting up a dog for failure could be strategic for the training,
It
but
could
what
be.
you're saying is we don't want to put a dog in a situation that they can't handle. And so
Sure.
I like to do the scale of 0 to 5. I think you use the same scale for your environmental difficulty assessment. If I have a dog and I'm taking them to a level 5, which is going to be the most difficult, and the dog is relatively new to training, and let's say I haven't progressed past a level 2, environment as far as the amount of distractions that are in that environment, I could take the dog to the level 5, but I'm not going to expect the dog to be able to do the things that the dog was able to do in the level 1. And something I tell all my clients that I work with, and I think, I mean, you and I, we train very similar. I say that I'm not going to use any sort of punishment on a dog until they're 80% proficient, roughly, on that command that we're asking from them in that environment. So even if the dog has been trained up to a level 5 environment. So let's say I've done a few level zeros, no distractions. I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, and I've done 5, and I'm at a brand new environment. I'm still going to give that dog the benefit of the doubt and work towards that 80% proficiency. And that happens, of course, rather quickly because your dog's already generalized. So if I start a dog in a new environment and right away the dog's a little thrown off, I'm still going to give them the answer to the questions. You know, that's what I like to call commands. A command is a question. I'm like, hey, do you know how to do a down in this environment? My dog goes, this is a little difficult. I'm going to help them out. And then once they show me, okay, I understand how to do it in this environment, which again, if they've already reached that level, they get to it very, very quickly. Now, if I want to, if I choose, if that's how I'm training this dog, then I can go ahead and transition to positive punishment if needed for the reliability. But often, if we've done the proper steps prior to that, like you said, we're setting them up for success. They're going to be able to handle it. And an analogy that I often use, I know you're not a big gamer, Sergio, and I haven't been playing games since December, but I do enjoy video games. I grew up playing them. And some of these open world games, there's one that I always use as an example, which is Assassin's Creed. Some of the newer ones. So if you ever play Assassin's Creed, you build up your character, but in the very beginning, you can explore the entire map. And there's areas in the map that are designed for later stages in the game. And if you go there early, when your character's still at a very low level, you can explore the environment. But if you try to go into combat with some of the enemies, you could hit them 500 times. It's not going to do anything. One hit, you're out. So it's like, yeah, you can go there, but your character is not leveled up yet. And that's how I look at the dogs that I'm training. I need to level up that dog's character through obedience, building them up through the levels until they can progress to the point where they're able to perform in those levels. So, sorry, I'm just bouncing off what you're saying. And this is how our conversations usually
Yeah,
go.
for sure.
Do you have anything else to add to that, or should I jump to the next one?
Let's jump to the next question. I do want to say something.
Yep.
Um, thanks for everyone that's kind of commented here. And one of the comments right here, he was actually a recruit in our company.
Oh, really? Which one? On your channel?
Yep.
Because
Yeah,
we
his
have
name.
this streaming, by the way, on my Facebook, my YouTube, and Sergio's YouTube. So,
Yep. Yep. So,
which one was it?
Inked Warrior 0351. So, yep. So he
And I'm
was.
I'm new on this streaming, so I think right now I'm looking at the ones that are commenting on your stream. How do I switch it to mine? Do you know?
I think it all populates on the same one. That's what kind of what happened when I did it. And then
Oh,
Sierra,
okay.
thank you for tuning in. And then Jeff,
Well, you keep chatting. I'm gonna look on my channel to see if any
for
of the
sure.
other comments are coming through. If the
Okay, for
live
sure.
actually it doesn't look like it's going. It might only be on your channel.
Oh,
I'm not seeing it on mine.
all right. Well, maybe we'll do 30 and 30. Something like that. I don't know. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
Well, let's see. So I think it is. So people are commenting. If you're commenting, let me know if you're watching it on Sergio's channel. I don't know why it's not streaming on mine. This is a learning phase. Look on my channel. See if you see it there.
All right, let me pull it up. Hey guys, so real quick, I really appreciate everyone's patience with this. We're trying to get together and we're trying to provide a lot of feedback, okay? And we want to get engaged with everyone out in there in the community. So we're trying these new platforms, and just like anything, you got to learn, right? So just like a lot of you that are watching, you're at different levels of dog training. Some of you may be experts, and some of you may just have gotten a puppy for the very first time. So we're going on. Sierra says she's on my channel.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it on mine. Let me go on my Facebook, see if it's streaming on there. It might only be able to do one YouTube channel at a time.
Oh no.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it on my
Yeah, it's not.
Facebook either. Okay. Well, you know
So
what? Since we're on your channel, does anyone currently on Sergio's channel, any of you guys that are watching, thanks for watching, thanks for hanging out. Do any of you have any questions? And then we'll switch and we'll do it again and we'll go on my channel.
yeah, for sure. That sounds great. That sounds great.
And all that stuff we talked about, we'll talk about it again, but it's still good. I mean, it's still all valuable information. So it's going to be a little repetitive. We might hit a few different points, but we'll do it anyways.
All right. So you know what? Since we're on my channel, we're talking about the kind of working dogs at the same time, setting them up for success, not taking them into different environments. One of the things that I'm starting to do is I'm starting to make sure that I spend more time in the foundational stages. So one of the issues that I see with a lot of the families I work with is they want to rush right into it. It
Mm,
reminds me of jujitsu, right? It's like, well, let's forget the technique, let's just roll, right? And then that's why, in my opinion, it used to take people 15 years to get a black belt. And now people are getting black belts in like 7 years, man. And not that many people are phenoms, right? It's the training approach has been become refined, and that's why people are getting better faster.
yeah,
And
absolutely. And you're right. Foundational skills are super important.
right. So, one of the things that I found this past weekend when I went up there. Sorry, I saw the comment. One of the things I saw at this seminar this past weekend is I feel like I rushed through some things, and some of the recommendations and advice that I got, um, it really. Sorry, I'm laughing at some of the text messages I'm getting.
Mm.
Um,
They're making fun of how we were having technical issues or what?
no, they're talking about my silver beard.
Yeah. You
So
just got to diet.
no, never. But anyway, so the bottom line is I rushed through some things that I shouldn't have, right? And it left a lot of gaps.
Mm.
You talked about us going for ring one, left a lot of gaps, and it kind of like bothered me because I asked Teddy to do an exercise from the brevet, and it wasn't that great. And I wanted to be like, no, I swear he knows how to do it. You know what I mean? But I do have video of him doing it, so there is proof. But once again, talk about environmental exposure. We were on a new field, new people. We had just driven 17 hours to get there. Like, it was wild. And then we do have a question from Sierra. Can you train an 8-year-old dog? He thinks he's a human. So I'm gonna let you get this, and then I'll give my experience or my opinion on it. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
well, I mean, you already know, and I know that yes, you can definitely train an 8-year-old dog. It really doesn't matter. So that old saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. What comes into play when we are working with an older dog is any sort of habits that have already been established in the dog's life. So if I'm working a brand new puppy, let's say, and I'm trying to potty train that puppy, if that puppy hasn't had any experience going to the bathroom in the house, potty training that dog is going to be very easy. We have a clean slate. But if I have an 8-year-old dog, and let's say that dog came from a hoarder's house, I'm using an extreme example, and the dog never got to leave the house, and the dog constantly relieved himself inside the house, that dog is going to be way more difficult to potty train because the dog believes, oh, going inside the house, that's where we go to the bathroom. And so, because of that, I'm going to have to get the dog to go out way more, and I'm going to have to do way more training in order to get the dog through that. But a lot of times, if I'm taking an 8-year-old dog that's never had any obedience but really doesn't have any behavioral issues, implementing obedience is pretty much the same way that I would train a puppy. I'm going to get the dog out, I'm going to build a relationship, I'm going to do some engagement work, I'm going to get the dog conditioned to the markers, I'm going to show him luring, I'm going to do free shaping and capturing and all these different tools that we use to train a dog. The same thing is going to work with the adult dog. I want to build the dog's motivation. Now, of course, as I said before, they're going to be more set in their way. So if the dog has low food drive, that might make it a little bit more difficult. I can work on building that up. If the dog has low toy drive, I might have to try to build that up if I want to use toys as some sort of motivator. But you can definitely train a dog when they're older. Just think about anything that they've been doing for a long time. It's going to be more difficult to work through. And I'll give you a quick human example. Let's say you play a certain sport and you use a certain technique. Let's say jujitsu, and you have a sweep that you use and you start using it from the very beginning and it works, and you use this sweep for 8 years, and 8 years you're crushing it. Or let's say a throw, something a little bit more extreme, or a takedown, and you use it every year, every day for 8 years, and it's beautiful, always works. And one day you go up against an opponent and you attempt to do it and it doesn't work. He ends up countering it and throws you to the ground. Well, you're going to go, well, that's a fluke, it was a bad day. That sweep still works, and I'm going to keep using that sweep or whatever technique you're using. But let's say the very first time you do it, you get tossed on your butt. It doesn't feel very good. It doesn't work very well. And you go, okay, maybe I'm not going to use that right now. And then you don't use it. So again, the longer they do something, the stronger that behavior is. And then also, if you're dealing with something that's a little bit more extreme, let's use the example of resource guarding. If you have an older dog that's been resource guarding for a long time, and then you want to try to stop that behavior, often what you might end up seeing is what they call an extinction burst. So it's going to get way worse before it gets better, because the dog goes, no, growling works, being aggressive works. And when we say, no, it doesn't work anymore, the dog goes, yes, it does. And they amp it up. So that's what it's called, the extinction burst. So it gets worse before it gets better. So those are only the really main things that I'm going to think about when I'm working with an older dog. But as far as the obedience goes, that's all going to be the same. You're dealing with the dog's built-in genetics. So however the dog is with their level of confidence, their level of motivation, same thing with a puppy. They have different scales. So I like to look at it as a scale of, like, let's say 1 through 100. 100, for example, is a dog that's 100% confident, and then you have a dog that has no confidence. And the dogs are going to be somewhere within that spectrum. And through training, we can increase it, especially in the very beginning during the imprinting stage. And you can increase it a little bit older, or a little bit later when they're older as well. Not as much, but again, you're working with those genetics. But the learning process, the training process pretty much does stay the same. Would you agree with all that, Sergio?
I do. Now I will say this is that talking about it from a dog training perspective or a dog trainer perspective, right? When a family comes to me and it's like, hey, I have this 7-year-old dog or this 8-year-old dog and I want to do this. Unfortunately, I look at life expectancy, right? And then I also look at whether or not the family is going to make the commitment, because the reality is, if something, any being, right, has done something for 2/3 of its life, it's going to be tough. Like, they can still learn. An example I give is like, me and my son, we both do jujitsu, right? I go in, he goes to the same class. They show a technique. It might be something I've never seen because jiu-jitsu is always evolving. He's gonna learn it faster than me, more than likely. He's gonna be able to pick up on it. It's gonna take less reps, right? Because he's younger. Same thing learning a language, right? They say learn a language when you're younger. I can still learn it. I'm still gonna be able to receive that and be able to apply it, but it'll take me longer. So the same thing with these 7-year-old, 8-year-old dogs. Like the expectation needs to be very clear, right? And we can't ask too much from our dog, in my opinion. Right? I've seen it a lot lately where people have unrealistic expectations, and they're like, "Oh, well, I've showed my dog." Well, shoot, like how many times have you been shown something and you still don't know how to do it,
Mm,
right? Like you go to tie your shoes and sometimes you tie your shoes wrong. You've been doing that your whole life, but we want to show a dog something 3, 4 times, and he's 7 years old now, 8 years old, and boom, like it just doesn't make sense. Like reasonable expectations for the dog, put the time in and realize you're not going to get those quick responses all the time. One thing that I talk to the families I work with is like, especially when we're talking about behavior mod, I say, hey, when humans go to therapy, do they do 6 sessions and then they're good? Like I've never heard of someone going to 6 sessions and all of a sudden they don't have PTSD or they don't have anxiety or depression. So the same thing when I'm doing behavior modification, like these 6 sessions, they're not going to get you set. They're going to give you all these tools that you can do to help manage the behavior, help shape the behavior, counter condition, desensitization, all these different things, but you're not going to fix the dog in 6 sessions, you
right.
know.
Yeah. And behavioral issues are different from obedience issues. And that's
Sure.
basically right. That's what I was saying. But a lot of times with obedience, I mean, the imprinting stage, the puppy stage, that is where we are building the desire to learn and the love for learning. And we're shaping certain things that is going to stick with the dog as they get older. But if I'm training a 3-year-old dog or I'm training an 8-year-old dog, as long as the dog still has the ability to retain information, and just like humans, they're all different. So some dogs are going to have more desire to learn and they're naturally going to learn faster. It also depends on the 8 years that the dog has already lived. So if I have a dog that's 8 years of age and it's been on a good diet, it's in good shape, it's had lots of physical activity, it's been in a very good, stable home where it's psychologically developed in a very good way, it's a happy, content dog, in comparison to a dog that may have been neglected, wasn't given the certain outlets that it needed. So, like, let's say a Malinois that's in a house where it doesn't get to do anything. It's not going out. It's not playing tug. It's just cooped up all the time. That's going to be much different because now we're dealing with some of those psychological issues that have developed over the years in comparison to the dog that's had a really good upbringing, just hasn't done any obedience. That dog's still going to be pretty easy to teach commands. And like you said, that's why we have those guidelines that we like to follow. If I know that I need the dog to be 80% proficient, I don't have to worry about the amount of reps. I'm just going to do as many as it takes until the dog gets it. And one of the analogies that I like to use is fitness. So if there's a fitness coach and you're like, I want to get in good shape. I want big muscles. I want my shoulders to be bigger, my chest to be bigger. I want to be 7% body fat, whatever, and you go up to the fitness or nutritional expert or nutrition science sports expert and you say, yeah, how long is that going to take? They're going to go, I don't know. I mean, it's going to depend on your diet, it's going to depend on your stress levels, it's going to depend on how quickly your muscles develop, are you taking creatine? All these different things, are so many factors that influence it. So it's really like, if you want those results, do the work, do it the right way, and eventually you'll get there. But like you said, you have to manage the right expectations. So I like to look at it as like, hey, we're training our dog, and this is a part of life. Just like as humans, we need that constant mental stimulation. As a kid, I used to think, oh, after school, I never have to worry about learning again, because I thought it was a bad thing because I didn't like school. But of course, we continue to learn our entire lives, and it's a very important part of us being healthy at a psychological level. And so I feel like it's very similar to the dogs. And again, that's why I like having those guidelines where if I let my clients or my students know, before you add punishment, we want 80% proficiency. If we're working on our dog doing unwanted behavior, we want the dog to be able to respond appropriately to the correct reinforcement events. And what a reinforcement event is. But for those that are listening that don't, I define a reinforcement event as any time we want the dog to perform an action. So if I want my dog to do an action, if I give them a command, that's a reinforcement event. If my dog violates a boundary, I use the word wrong. I think you do the same thing, Sergio. I say wrong. What do I want the dog to do? I want them to go back to wherever they just were. I use this during my talks, my little doggy. So if my dog violates the boundary, I go wrong. What do I want my dog to do? I want them to leave the area. Well, I know in order to add a correction, before I add a correction, based on the guidelines I like to follow, I want the dog to go back on their own. So the dog violates the position, wrong, and the dog goes, oh, I know what to do, and they go back on their own. Once they do that, I go, okay, now I can add positive punishment to get that final stage of reliability if I choose. But I can't get to that stage until the dog does that. So if I have an older dog and that dog maybe doesn't retain or learn as quickly, I'm just going to have to do more reps. But I know I have to reach that point of proficiency before I can add the punishment. And that, for me, has always simplified it in my own mind, where it's like, okay, I do have a certain goal, but I don't always have goals for single sessions. So I don't bring a dog out. It's like, all right, that dog's going to do a 5-minute sit stay. Because then if the dog doesn't do it, now we might be getting frustrated. And of course, that negative energy the dog can smell, they can sense it, and it's going to affect their performance even more. And it's why we always talk about, like, we try not to get mad at our dogs. We try not to get upset. We try not to yell, because that's going to put our dog in a position where they're focused on the threat and they're less focused on learning what we're trying to teach them. And I know I started to go in a few different directions there, but what do you think? Do you agree? Do you think a few other things came up as I was talking?
No, I mean, I agree with what you said. I just wanted to touch base. So Casey, she's a dog trainer. I actually do a podcast with her. It's Casey and Sergio, Beyond the Leash. There's a little plug there. She's tuning in, so I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. She's really great. All right. Jeff had asked, how do you proof your dogs? You kind of talked about that already. He also said, how old is too old to start training for ring? So, I do want to remind you, I'm very new at ring sport, but in my personal opinion, you have to look at the overall health and well-being of the dog. Like, they are athletes, right? So you wouldn't normally, right? The average person isn't going to pick up, and I talk about jiu-jitsu all the time. They're not going to pick up jiu-jitsu at 60 years old, so I would take that same equivalent. And if they do pick it up, they're not doing it the same way a 20-year-old is doing it, the same way a 30-year-old is doing it. So kind of just know where your dog's at. And if you're going to do it for fun. Make sure that it's safe. If you can join a club, join a club. Okay. I'm not a part of a club right now. And wow, there is such a gap. There's such a gap in what I know versus someone that has been doing the sport the same amount of time but has access to a club. Um, Now I
And
do want hold on, I do want to touch on this, and I think you're gonna pop up on this real quick. It says also blaming a new field and new people is a no-no. Look closer at your training, and you will see some BS you did not enforce. So Jeff, I love your engagement with my channel. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna tell you right now, I think you're wrong. Okay, and here's why. All right, generalization is a thing, right? We talk about it all the time. So just because my dog can sit and down, in my living room doesn't mean they're going to be able to sit and down outside my house. So when you take a dog in, I'm pretty sure every person, most people that compete in ring sports, right? The first time you start taking your dog to new fields, it is going to be challenging for them, and if they are not generalized to that specific behavior that you're asking. Okay. Um, so
oh, and that's why when people are competing, they do train right in multiple fields. People that
multiple
are
decoys.
competing in protection sports, right? They're trying their best to work with as many decoys as possible. So then when they do compete and they send their dog, even if it's a new decoy, the dog goes, I know this, I've done this multiple times. But before trials, they usually have an open field day prior to the trial. So it gives you an opportunity to get out there on the field, to do some obedience in the field and build a quick foundation, even in a short amount of time. So then the next day when they have the trial, your dog goes, I've been to this field. You didn't let me get away with any BS yesterday. You're not going to let me get away with any BS today. And then just as I believe Jeff was saying, and then the dog is more likely to perform. But that is, of course, all part of the training process. And I do want to touch on the how do you proof your dogs? That question. I know you said we talked about it a little bit, and we did. And really, it's just about, for me, the way I look at proofing is once the dog reaches 80% proficiency in an environment, then I'm going to gradually increase the difficulty. I'm going to build the dog back up to 80% proficiency at that difficulty. Then I'm going to add a new difficulty. So I'm gradually adding more difficulty to the environment, whether I'm adding things to that environment that I'm currently in, or I'm taking the dog to environments that are increasingly more difficult. But we do like to do it at a gradual pace, so our dogs are going to be successful, very much as what you said earlier, Sergio.
For sure. And, I want to talk about a little bit. I'll give you an example of which conditions were, excuse me, which exercises my dog was generalized to and conditioned well to. All right. So his protection exercises that we were doing. Okay. So he did well. There was literally 9 decoys in their suits on the field, 15 feet away from Teddy when I was sending him downfield. He chose the right decoy. And so he did really well on that. Where he wasn't doing well was we hadn't worked any obedience all weekend, and I had a private lesson on Monday, and I had him do healing on leash, and he like cut in front of me a couple times. You know what I'm saying? So once again, after I cleaned it up a little bit, I used a little bit of negative reinforcement, and I used a little bit of positive punishment, and then we got right. But once again, the ask, I think, needs to be reasonable, and you need to know your dog, right? So Teddy, although he's 4 years old, he's new to the sport. There were some contributing factors on why I kind of slow rolled him, and I didn't really get him involved as early as I should have.
Yep, I agree with that stuff. And if we're gonna get to the other live Q&A, I think we have to end this one and get to the next one, because I still have to get to the gym. I got to catch up to you. So exactly. And so someone has said, great info, guys. Mom duty calls, got to head out. Awesome. Thanks for joining us. And then I think that's good for this one, right? How long did we go? 30, almost 40 minutes.
Yeah, no, it's definitely good. I do want to thank everyone, though, real quick, before you cut us off, Nate. I do want to say thank you to everyone that tunes into the channel. I appreciate your comments. I appreciate your engagement, guys. Just because we disagree on some stuff, just kind of is what it is. So Nate's my mentor. He taught me a lot about dog training, and I still call him for guidance. And there are times him and I disagree, and just so you know, I'm usually right. But, just kidding.
And we also constantly share things that we're doing. So like earlier today, I reached out because I figured out a new way to make thumbnails, and I was like, you got to see how I make these thumbnails now. Super easy. But anyways, and that's something that's important too. So if you are training, if you can find a training partner or whatever, it definitely helps with the process. And I agree. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting. Any final saved rounds?
Well, go train some dogs.
All right, go train some dogs, or go to my channel because we're about to do this again.
Go to Nate's channel for sure.
So yeah, Nate Schomer, you'll find it on YouTube. All right,
it'll be pretty easy.
All right, thanks again, guys. We really appreciate it.